All right, questions from the audience then.
Thank you. Aaron Gadiel from Gaydon's Lawyers. My question could be addressed to all of you, but perhaps Jeff might have something to say about it first. In this debate, and we can see it already, we begin to talk about the community as if it's one amorphous group and it's something separate from the industry, from the politicians. Yet in our system of government, the community votes regularly and elects local councillors and elects state politicians. When we dialogue with the community outside of that process, we're not dialoguing with everyone, we're dialoguing with people who self-select. And that will be skewed against, no matter what time the hours of the meetings are, that'll be skewed against people with busy lives, people with young children, people with jobs. So when we choose to dialogue directly with the community outside of elected representatives, how do we ensure that that process isn't skewed in favour of small minority but vocal groups?
Terrific.
I think there is an answer to that question, and I don't think we would go to Greece to find answers to questions of contemporary budget practice, but we might go to ancient Greece to find ideas about democratic participation. There's no doubt that those who self-select, those who have a very, very clear sense of their own interest and who find it hard to get out of that, one way, of course, is to randomly select. And I think we've seen some very good models from around the world where community panels have been randomly selected in total or randomly selected in part to break through and to encourage a debate about the common good rather than the individual interest. The hardest thing in the world, of course, is to find the public interest. Most of us get locked into our own interest. So random selection is definitely a proven method of overcoming that particular problem.
And we'll discuss that a bit later. Could I ask the gentleman with the microphone to stand and ask his question? And could you please say your name and where you're from?
Yes, I'm Phil Bradley from the Parramatta and Blacktown District Environment Group. And we in Western Sydney see the new planning system as subjugating ecologically sustainable development to the interests of economic growth. And I'm particularly concerned if the panel might be able to suggest how they see the new Green Paper as addressing the needs of Western Sydney, where we've already seen excessive destruction of endangered and threatened bushland, of cultural, Aboriginal and colonial heritage values, and prime agricultural land, which is essential for food and water security in Western Sydney. So the urban sprawl threatens that seriously. So we're very concerned that the new planning system will facilitate destructive development in Western Sydney. How do you see the new planning system addressing this, and why hasn't ecologically sustainable development principles been primary in the new system?
Who would like to take that question? Steve?
I actually think it's the exact opposite to what you said. This new planning system will protect those assets that you have said have been diminished over years as a result of urban sprawl. In the planning system, they'll engage the community. There'll be plans, you'll be able to identify where development will be taking place. And part of the reason why you've got the problem that you've got at the moment is because there have been no long-term plans. There have been no visions from the community. And effectively, you've had people, and I've just been on the ABC talking about the farming land. This system is critical to ensuring we can redress some of the problems that have been caused in the past.
All right. We take a couple of questions back to back from this table, if we can. If you could just stand.
Brian O'Dowd, Urban Design Planner. The Minister one of the comments he made was the importance of outcome-focused planning. The Green Paper failed to make any reference to design in planning. There was no reference at all to that design issue. Hopefully this has been rectified in the White Paper, but I'd like to know what the planning panels before us today has to say about design and the importance of it in the new Act.
All right, the question about design. We'll take one more.
Andrew Gaines from Transform Australia. Heard them mention the common good. I like to hear that language. On current trends, economic growth and coal exports and all that stuff will exacerbate what's called extreme weather events. Some people call it climate mayhem. things like the Black Saturday bushfires, the recent 2 years running of floods, all that stuff. It's going to get worse. This will make food security problematical in time, not yet. My question is, how might this affect the growth agenda that's embedded in the Green Paper?
All right. So we have a question about design. We have a question about climate change.
Can I have a go at the question about design, Donna?
Just one sec. We'll just take this third question, then we'll get the members of the panel to answer all.
Tim Williams, architect and urban designer, and on the committee of Sydney Architecture Festival. I have a question about why the transport plan and the infrastructure plan was released before the new planning system was in place. Surely these would be part of the outcomes of a planning system.
All right. So perhaps, Lucy, you might take the question about design and...
I think the issue of design is fundamental to good strategic planning. I think one of the things that's created a lot of confusion, uncertainty, lack of certainty and, opacity in the system is that the typical planning controls today can say, residential 2A or 3C or whatever the zoning number is with an FSR of 1 to 1 or 0.5 to 1, whatever the numbers are. For normal people, that means absolutely nothing. So I think what a good advantage of a stronger planning system would be to have a better understanding or better clarity and a better focus on, if you like, form-based codes which tell everybody what's acceptable, after extensive strategic planning and input from the community at a very early stage before these drawings are actually created, so that people do have an understanding of where the design fits in, because the designing of the buildings and the designing of the public realm is fundamental to having sustainable development.
Carolyn, do you want to answer the question on the cart before the horse question?
I'll give it a go. We've been working really closely with the Department of Planning. In fact, we've had shared teams working on these plans together in the metropolitan planning and involved in the overall planning process. These issues are working along in parallel to try and get the good outcomes as fast as we can. We're taking into account a lot of the issues that are coming out of the discussion papers for both purposes and trying to actually develop a process that sets up a strategic framework of the sort of things that need to be done in the state as fast as we can also improve the mechanisms to get to the points of delivery.
Jeff Gallop?
Just on design, quickly, one thing we can say, I think, is that environmental issues have to be incorporated in design. New South Wales actually led the way with basics, and I had a hell of a battle within my government to try to replicate that system in Western Australia. There was a huge opposition to it. But the second point is, I just wanted to just briefly say that we appointed a chief architect as part of the program we took to the people in 2001. And as a cabinet minister, having that architect come in on our major projects, like the new theatre in Perth, the new entertainment centre and whatever, and talk about these issues with the cabinet, we found very constructive. And I think local government could follow similar approach.
Climate.
Actually, I might address a couple of those issues with respect to design, but also climate change and some of those environmental challenges we face. And although the Green Paper doesn't have dedicated sections to architectural design, urban design, environmental change, what it does very strongly talk about is strategic planning. And strategic planning is a process whereby we address and we recognise and we study and we research all of those issues and we bring them together in a recognised plan that takes things forward. So yes, the Green Paper doesn't go to that level, but certainly a new planning system going forward will seek to incorporate and address all of those key issues, which are fundamental requirements for us to address as planners. I think it's part of that, yeah.
Can we just take three questions back to back? We'll start on this side of the room. There's a woman with a microphone. Please say your name and where you're from, and we'll take the three questions and then we'll get the answers. The gentleman at the back.
Thank you. I'm Peter Sainsbury. I work in health. But the comment I want to make is that throughout the process and in the Green Paper and broadly what's been said this morning, it's not that I disagree with anything, it's what's lacking that seems to me to be the problem overall. And what's lacking is a grand vision. that what's lacking is a clear focus on why we have a planning system and what it's expected to achieve. For me, that's about helping to create a better society. What we're focusing on all the time is the processes, the planning application process, community participation, one thing and another. They're all very important, but we're losing the focus on why do we have a planning system. And that's where I'd like to see a major reorientation of the way this whole review is taking place. Mm-hmm. Let's identify what is it we want: better health, better environmental protection, one thing and another. And let's relegate the process issues to how we achieve those outcomes.
Next question here.
I'm Elizabeth Alenius from Pyrmont Action. I live in a planned suburb, which was probably conceived 20 to 25 years ago. No amount of planning can anticipate the future. And what we've found in Pyrmont is that the assumptions on which our plans were based were that families with children and young people did not live in high-rise apartment buildings. Clearly, this is not the case. Our 0 to 4s have increased yet again in the last census, and the planners did not make provision for any of the vital infrastructure to serve a real and dynamic and growing community of all different ages. The Green Paper seems to place a lot of emphasis on certainty, but how does the panel anticipate that the need for the flexibility and community participation along the whole sort of development of a new community like ours can be realised against the need for certainty?
And just one final question. We are running out of time from this side of the room.
Raynor Jones. Just a question to Lucy, first of all. You've mentioned in your earlier address about harnessing technology and the internet base. However, in many areas in regional Australia, that's not a reliable option. We don't have reliable internet. We don't have speeds enough to download visuals before your computer drops out. So from a community perspective, or even a council perspective, and all your other business people that are involved as stakeholders, the IDs are great, but the access is still a big problem. So I was just wondering how that can be addressed and be another option put in there for those people that live in those areas within the scope of the new legislation.
All right, just a specific question, and then we'll come to vision and flexibility. Lucy Turnbull. Do you want to answer that?
Well, I think it is a problem that some communities are still digitally disadvantaged. I understand that's going to be resolved with a broadband network or another one that's going to be rolled out a lot faster.
So you hear, I hope.
But let's leave that to one side. I mean, digital access is a really important thing. I guess my experience is in cities where there are, relatively fewer areas of digital deprivation or disadvantage. And I think so I'm assuming we're talking about communities with reasonable broadband access speeds, which is certainly the experience of the communities I've lived and worked with. So I understand that issue, but we've got to use strong visualisation, especially in denser areas and more rural and remote areas. Development density isn't usually such an issue as it is in more urban issues and greenfield and infill areas.
Who would like to take the answer? Yes, go.
Yeah, just from a local government perspective and probably a rural regional perspective, I think the answer lies somewhere in between with targeting or developing those engagement strategies based on the community you're trying to engage with. As I said, it's pointless having one strategy or one requirement that goes across the state, a prescriptive approach to how to engage, because every single community in New South Wales is very different and have very different agendas, have very different literacy levels. So I think it has to be something that's designed to suit the community that you're trying to engage with.
Okay, well said. We have run out of time for other questions, so I'll just get answers to these ones. The vision thing, have we missed the vision thing? Jeff Gallop?
Well, I think vision for New South Wales ought to be the state plan, which of course is one element of politics that I notice from the outside looking in, that both sides have agreed upon. There's state plan, it's been continued. One side of politics might put a slightly different value emphasis in it to another, but the framework is there for outlining our overall vision from which the planning system ought to be a means to an end, and I very much agree with the point.
Okay, Lucy Turnbull. Oh,
Well, I think they possibly, the state plan is important. I take your point that sometimes these objectives need to be explicit. I think it's all about managing growth, sustainability, climate change, and as I said earlier, tackling the national productivity challenge, which will to a large extent be tackled in a spatial location. It has to happen in space.
This is all outlined in the document, I think. And you've got your planning hierarchies and you've got the aspirations for the system. And one thing that we're encouraged about is looking at economic viability and feasibility. But just a word of warning, don't dress it up. Don't dress a planning system up and a set of rules up to do something that they actually can't do. So I heard before it was about creating a better society. Well, that's what everyone wants from everything. But be clear, be focused, and ensure that the system can actually deliver what your aspirations and visions are.
Sarah, do you want to take that final point? How do you future-proof things?
I think it's a real reality of planning is that it's dynamic and things change over time. And I think it's important that we recognise that is the role of planning, is to adjust and to change. And for that reason, you can't have one plan that, shall last forevermore. Plans have to be constantly readjusted and updated. But a key part of that, it goes very much to what you're saying. It's about actually engaging with communities, existing communities and future communities to understand what they need. And that very much is the framework of what's trying to be set up of a good planning system with the Green Paper. And back to the point about vision, is that, the idea is that the community is brought on board to actually create that vision. And at the moment, the planning system change is creating a framework to enable that to happen. So we're at the early days, but the vision will come in time when we work together to be able to achieve what that is.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the members of the panel.